Talk Nerdy is brought to you by its sponsor AT&T, which provides IU students, faculty, and staff with personal cellular services at discounted rates. Talk Nerdy to Me, a conversation about technology's hottest topics at Indiana University and beyond. Welcome to episode 18 of Talk Nerdy to Me, a conversation about technology at IU and beyond. I'm your host, Janae Cummings, and today we have a special episode focused on IU's Media Digitization and Preservation Initiative, better known as MDPI. We'll speak to MDPI's Mike Casey, Director of Technical Operations, and Julie Bobe, Executive Associate Dean at IU Libraries and Director for Library Operations for MDPI. They're going to help us better understand the initiative, its importance, and the impact it can have on IU students, faculty, and staff. Mike, Julie, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Can you start by telling us about the origins of media preservation at IU? In other words, how did this initiative get started here?
Well, of course, the collection and the preservation and the access of audio, video, and film go back many generations on the IU campus. And this is something that IU has been particularly strong in over the years. But I trace the beginning of MDPI back to the old Sound Directions project, which was funded by NEH from about 2005 to 2012 at the Archives of Traditional Music. And there we were engaged in audio preservation work. We had one engineer preserving one recording at a time, one by one by one. At some point we asked ourselves, well, how long is it going to take to preserve all of the ATM's holdings? So we ran some numbers, and we calculated that it would take 58 years. At which point we then said, well, what about the music library? They have more stuff than the ATM does. So we did the same set of calculations and came up with 120 years. At which point we thought, we simply do not have this kind of time. We knew that forces of degradation and obsolescence were impacting media holdings tremendously. We saw that in our own collections. We knew that many practitioners were saying there was a window of opportunity from around 10 to 15 years to digitally preserve media holdings. Otherwise, it would be either impossible or just prohibitively expensive to digitize large collections. So we thought we obviously need something larger than this, and perhaps more something that operates more at a campus level. So our next step was to get approval to do a media preservation survey on the Bloomington campus, which we got sponsorship from OVPR, the Office of the Vice Provost for Research, and began contacting Bloomington units to see whether they had audio, video, or film. This work took place in 2008, 2009, and we published a report based on this work in 2009. And what we discovered was, yes, Bloomington had a lot of stuff. In fact, over 560,000 audio, video, and film objects just on the Bloomington campus. And the range of problems that we had seen in some of the ATMs and the music library's collections could be found in other units on campus as well. So based on the strength of that work, we then sought and received approval for a planning project that began right after the publication of the Media Preservation Survey. And this was formally charged by the provost. We formed a working group. The project was funded by the libraries, UITS, the College of Arts and Sciences, the Vice Provost for Research, and the Provost's Office. And we embarked upon a one-year planning project that lasted 3.5 years and resulted in a major publication called Meeting the Challenge of Media Preservation that we published in 2011 that attempted to lay out some strategies and solutions for the problems that we were seeing. And then on October 1st, 2013, IU President Michael McRobbie announced the creation of MDPI, and here we are today.
Yes, we are here today. You know, the origins of MDPI is an interesting question, and depending on how you look at it, you could take it back farther than the university has invested so deeply and so consistently in tremendous technical infrastructure, both storage and networking, that can handle this type of thing. The collections, as Mike says, the expertise in digital preservation. One project that predates this started in the early 90s, and it was the Variations music digitization project that's been going for, now 25 years, that built infrastructure expertise. So there were these pockets of incredible achievement, I think, and investment that it was brilliant, I think, of the, actually it was the Office of the Vice Provost for Research to recognize the opportunity to really leverage all of these investments that have been going on for decades, really.
You mentioned COAS, ATM, I think the Jacobs School, UITS, OVPR. How many units at IU are participating in the initiative?
We think there are approximately 80 units on campus that hold media objects. So the Gail Cook Music Library and ATM are the two largest. Okay. But there are many. Some of them are regular libraries and archives and collections, museums. Many are units that just happen to have collected these items, but their primary mission is something else. It's research or it's teaching. So one of the challenges of this project was met early on, I think, with this really exhaustive and comprehensive inventory on which everything was based. Some of the challenges facing us now are devising systems that can work equally well across this very disparate set of units.
Mm-hmm. Is an initiative of this scale unusual for higher education, like getting this massive collaboration across all of these units?
Well, in many ways, in the media preservation world, it's a bit unprecedented.
It's unique.
At least in the United States and possibly beyond as well. I don't think there's any other institution that has yet committed to a comprehensive approach to digitally preserving their media holdings. Other institutions are doing media preservation work, and many of them are doing excellent work, but not in quite as comprehensive a way or as strategic a way as we are. There are, institutions like Stanford University that has a very well-regarded media preservation lab that's doing great stuff. New York University's been doing this work, University of North Carolina, and so forth.
Library of Congress.
Library of Congress, but IU has committed to digitally preserving all significant audio and video recordings on all IU campuses within 5 years, and that is unique.
The Shoah Foundation at USC has the world's largest visual history archive related to genocides, particularly the Holocaust. Are there any collections at IU that are unique to this university or largely held here?
Oh, many. Very many. So, the collections at this university reflect the work that's done at this university. And being a very humanities focused campus for many years, the variety and depth is astonishing. We don't actually even know it yet, I think, ourselves. The Archives of Traditional Music has incredible collections of ethnographic audio and video studies, materials that researchers have collected and deeded to the university. The director of the archives was talking the other day about footage of Afghanistan before any of the wars, of people's regular life. So it's just astonishing. The music library has all the recordings of the School of Music, which we've got. We just discovered today some lacquer discs of Wendell Willkie's speech. We've got the examples really. We're just starting to learn them ourselves.
We could go on, so maybe I will go on.
There you go. Okay.
For example, the Lilly Library holds hundreds of lacquer discs recordings from Orson Welles. And this is my favorite collection, as you've guessed by now, Julie, because I keep bringing it up. But it's an amazing collection, dating from the 1940s into the 50s, one-of-a-kind discs, recordings of Welles, his programs, his associates, some rehearsal material. It's really an invaluable collection. The Archives of Traditional Music has wax cylinders dating from 1893. These are cylinders recorded in the field. Again, one-of-a-kind recordings documenting traditions that in some cases have been lost, no longer practiced, including such things as a collection recorded by Edward S. Curtis, famous photographer of Native American communities in the western U.S. We have all of his remaining cylinder recordings, of which there are somewhat over 200. It's said that he recorded many more, but those have been lost. So we have those. The School of Music has music recitals going back to the 1940s on lacquer disc, and then extending into the open reel tape era. So all of the famous classical and jazz musicians associated with the Jacobs School can be found on these recordings. So we have, in many ways, an embarrassment of riches to work from.
For a lot of our audience, I'd say they trend younger, and when we talk about aging media formats, they're thinking, oh, those CDs my parents have, like that kind of thing. You talked about wax cylinders and lacquer discs. What other types of media formats is MDPI working to preserve?
Well, we go back to wax cylinders starting in 1893, recorded into the 1930s. From there, we have, starting in the late 20s, aluminum discs, one-of-a-kind recordings, again, unique recordings. Lacquers coming in the mid-30s up until the early 1950s. Wire recordings, a wire that's thinner than a strand of human hair that passes across a playback head and produces audio from the late 1940s into the early 50s. Then we're into the open reel tape era, 50s, 60s, 70s, and even later. Then we finally get to cassettes and then to CDs. Videotape formats include 2-inch quad, the first video format starting in 1956, 1-inch, after that, U-matic, VHS, and the list goes on.
For our community of students, faculty, and staff, why should this preservation matter so much? How does it impact them?
Oh, we can talk for a while about that.
Let's do.
You know, the genesis of this entire project was based on the knowledge and the agreement that these materials are, one, valuable, and two, are going away, that unless we do something to intervene, they will no longer exist. So the preservation part of this is key. Mm-hmm. These materials, some of them will be widely accessible after they're digitized, some will not because of rights issues. So just because they're being digitized doesn't mean that they will be available to the world. They will be to the extent that we are legally able to make them so. Accessible or not accessible, it's the preservation component that's inescapable and needs to happen so that not only today's faculty, students, and staff of Indiana University or any place else in the world can do proper research and understand their cultural history.
So we're really preserving a tremendous number of recordings that we think have significant research and instructional value here at IU and beyond IU to the state of Indiana, to the nation, and in some cases international value as well. And I think, just to take one example of students or faculty in the Jacobs School of Music, let's say they're performing, they're putting on a production of a major opera. If they're interested in understanding how that opera has been produced in the past, they can go back through 50 years of recordings from the Jacobs School that are not currently now very accessible. But once these are digitized, they can go through the digital files and begin to understand how an individual part was sung or acted over the course of many years. That, I think, has tremendous value. That's just one example that comes to mind.
We're taking this project in steps, and our focus right now is to digitize for preservation, and we're gonna do it, and it'll be an enormous accomplishment. The next step after that is as broad of access to as much of the material as possible. After that, there are lots of really intriguing possibilities in terms of new forms of research that can't be done on individual recordings, but with an enormous digital library, the possibilities are really exciting. For us who are down in the trenches making this thing work and getting them digitized, that looks a little farther into the future, but it's there.
You spoke about wax cylinders, particularly in lacquer discs, I think, which are at the most risk. Is that correct? Can you explain why? What about them is hastening that degradation?
Well, lacquer discs are in many ways the poster child of degradation. They are chemically unstable. They are actively falling apart before, in some cases, literally before our very eyes. Basically, lacquer discs were plasticized or softened with a material called castor oil. And as these discs react to moisture in the air, that castor oil is leaching out of the coating. Mm-hmm. As it leaches out of the coating shrinks. The coating is most often on an aluminum base. The aluminum base does not shrink. So what that leads to is cracking and peeling of the coating, what we call delamination. Once a disc delaminates, it can no longer be played. And we have seen this at the Archives of Traditional Music. We have lacquer discs there that have delaminated so badly we have lost the chance to digitize them. We have other lacquers that are actively delaminating. They're getting worse. We can still get something off of them, but in many ways it is literally a race against time. Not all formats are this bad off in terms of degradation. Wax cylinders are clearly fragile and clearly deteriorating through a number of different processes, but still playable for the most part, although some wax cylinders have split and cracked and can no longer be played or can only be played in very specific and difficult ways.
How do you play a wax cylinder? What do
On a
you...
wax cylinder player, of course.
Of course, naturally.
There's two ways. One is the stylus-based method using a machine like one that's known as the archaeophone, in which case you have a stylus, you have a mandrel. You take the cylinder and you put it on the mandrel. The cylinder is cylindrical, I mean it's round, and it spins around, and the stylus goes down into the grooves, or sometimes called threads or turns, and produces sound. It's a mechanical process. The second way to play a wax cylinder is through an optical imaging methodology, such as one developed by Carl Haber and the Library of Congress, known as IRENE, for many reasons that I won't get into, but it images the cylinder, produces a map of the cylinder's surface, including its grooves and its, the size and shape of the grooves, and then computer algorithms translate that map into audio. That's another method that can be used. Both have their advantages and disadvantages.
Are you guys making any effort to improve fidelity, to make any improvements with the digital technology to, I guess, add value to those recordings in terms of a way to listen to them or experience them in any ways?
Yeah, so the question was, are we doing anything to improve fidelity of the old recordings, which are in some cases deteriorating and not in great shape? Yes and no. We try to achieve optimal playback, which often means cleaning the recording, repairing it when necessary, getting it back as close as possible to its original state so that it can be played back through the playback machine and get the best transfer possible. The audio engineer or the video engineer will then need to manipulate the playback machine to maximize the interface between this deteriorating recording and the contact point of the playback machine, whether that's a stylus in the case of a disc, or it's a tape head in the case of an open reel tape machine. So there's often some hands-on manipulation that happens that, in fact, helps the disc to play more optimally. In terms of cleaning up the recording through signal processing, using software after digitization, no, we're not doing that First off, it's not part of the preservation mission. Our mission is to get as authentic and accurate a transfer as possible from that original. We want to represent that original deteriorating recording as accurately as possible and carry that accurate representation forward for future generations to use. Other folks can come along and signal process it and try to clean it up if they wish to do that. We do not have the funds, we do not really have the resources to do that kind of work.
I will say also Mike talked about degradation. The other thing that Mike talks about frequently is obsolescence, and the video formats particularly are subject to that problem of just no longer having machinery to play these. And I did want to mention that film, 16 and 32 millimeter film, we have very large and valuable collections of that here at Indiana. They are part of the MDPI project, but they're in a different phase, and right now we're just starting to plan for the digitization of film.
There are a different set of technological challenges with film than with audio and video.
Yep.
And so film is on a bit of a different path, but it is on the path, as Julie was saying.
Are there any noteworthy films in that archive, or any documentaries or anything that maybe people can see
So there are lots of different film collections here. Lilly Library has the Peter Bogdanovich collection, the John Ford collection. There's Charlton Heston's first appearance in a movie. There's home movies of John Wayne. Then there are Orson Welles collections, and we have a very large, one of the largest actually, collections of educational films that were produced, many of them, and distributed by Indiana University through the 50s and 60s and into the 70s, I think. And we have over 100,000 of these on topics you just can't even imagine, from Your Daughter at IU and social guidance films about etiquette, and to Dissecting a Bat, and lots in between. We have propaganda films from World War II. We have, there's...
I think those are vast.
There's a wealth of research possibilities with the educational films, I think, that have yet to be exploited. And hopefully, digitizing these will help us to do that. I remember talking with a professor at IU once who studies the history of cities. And he had used some of these educational films at IU in order to understand the images that cities construct of themselves. And he said it was, 1,000 times better than a still image, having access to these moving image representations of cities that he and his students could use as part of their work. He thought was invaluable.
Are our film collections one of a kind in the way that many of the audio video, or in the way that many of the audio collections are?
Some are, yes. Well, ours are more than others. So we don't have that many what we would consider feature films. We have documentary films, we have educational films, and we have the films that have been collected by film stars. Not many feature films in our archives.
But the educational films were widely distributed at one point in time. But for the most part, those have not been saved by the institutions that received or distributed them. So for the most part, they've been thrown away.
Yep.
IU has saved them, and now we have what are very rare copies of many of these films.
Calling back to Orson Welles a bit, because I love Orson Welles. How did that collection come to be at IU? What connection was there to get those recordings here?
That's a question for the Lilly Library. Julie, I don't know if you know the answer to that.
Well, the question can be generalized to many of the special collections that end up at the Lilly Library, which is an amazing place. So the Lilly Library is well known, and many people with valuable collections want their collections there, and so they were gifted to the Lilly Library.
Okay. When we're talking about the preservation, where is this taking place? Is it on the IU campus? Is it in Bloomington?
It's taking place on the IU campus in Bloomington. We have renovated the first floor of the Innovation Center out at 10th and the Bypass as a media digitization facility. And there are two parts to that facility. Our basic strategy has been to partner with a private company, in this case Memnon Archiving Services, based in Brussels, really the leading digitization player in Europe over the past decade, also with an operation in the Middle East at the moment. But Memnon has come in. They are setting up an operation in the Innovation Center, and they are charged with digitizing through what we call parallel transfer workflows, where one operator digitizes more than one recording at a time. They will digitize the bulk of IU's recordings using that type of workflow. Now, for recordings that cannot go through a parallel transfer workflow because they're too fragile or they have, some type of problem that needs to be mitigated before they can be played back, IU is setting up a smaller digitization operation to handle the fragile stuff. That is co-located with the Memnon operation at the Innovation Center. So you have this combination of public and private happening here, which I think is a very strong way to see that these are digitally preserved.
Are the renovations in the Innovation Center designed to account for the fragility of these archives?
Well, the entire strategic plan is, yes, in that we have the IU side of the operation that is specifically tasked with handling the fragile materials that need to be handled in a certain way. And to handle them in that way, we hire audio and video engineers, and either they bring training with them, experience with them, or we train them to handle these old recordings in the way that they need to be handled. And to do so in an environment in which it is possible to do high-quality work. So, for example, the two audio studios on the IU side of the facility have been designed as critical listening spaces. And that is so that the engineer is able to hear accurately what is coming off of the old recording, uninfluenced by what is happening in the room around him or her. So, for example, if an engineer is playing back a lacquer disc, he or she will need to select the best shape and size of stylus to fit into the groove of that disc and to get the least noise possible. That engineer needs to be able to hear accurately to make an appropriate decision. And that's the kind of decision that will follow that recording, essentially for generations, as the digital file that results from that transfer process is what researchers will access into the future.
I will say, too, that the fragility of the items, the whole logistics of selecting, tracking, packing, delivering, sending back of these items has garnered the attention of lots of individuals in UITS and the libraries and MDPI trying to get this whole system to work properly. And so the effective handling of the materials has to start at the moment it's pulled from the shelf of whatever of these 80 units on campus, all the way through the process, through the digitization and back again.
When that process is complete, will you start working to make those things accessible and then getting them online or in some sort of place, or are we looking at a timeline like in 2018, for instance, we strive to have X amount of archives online for accessibility?
The project, as Mike mentioned earlier, proposes, and we will be successful at digitizing these materials by the bicentennial, 2020. That means that they will have been selected, they will have been digitized, the digital files will have been placed in the shared digital archive, the SDA, also in a repository, a managed repository, and into a dark archive that will be available to the collection owners as they come off the line. So this will be a continuous process by format as they're digitized both through the Memnon and the IU facility. and they will then be deposited into this dark archive that the collection owner will have access to. At that point, the collection owner, whether it's the Archives of Traditional Music or Radio and TV or Lilly Library or whomever, will begin to go through those files and determine which ones can be made open and which ones, and they will be able to do that in this environment that we're building now called the Avalon Media System. So there aren't the kind of dates that you mentioned, because it's going to be this sort of flood of digital files out of this very high production.
A blizzard of
A
digital
blizzard,
files.
yeah, okay. Well, you get the idea. And so the idea is we'll identify the ones we think are the most likely that we can open up and are of the greatest interest, and we'll try and get those open as quickly as possible.
Okay. Is there any way for those at IU or any external communities across the state or nation, world, to support MDPI right now, or there are plans for that in the future?
I don't know of any specific plans, but I know that there are discussions about how to garner the resources we need to do all the work that's required to make this really, really successful, and I'm sure that's part of the discussions.
Question. I'm just wondering about the interaction relationship you might have with faculty or researchers along this process. Has it been, MDPI kind of working in a vacuum saying we're doing this, and we're going to give you guys this stuff, or has there been interest from the beginning with departments or faculty or individuals out there in the research community that have been a partner with you guys in any way in this, at least in terms of specifying special needs they have or considerations about access? Just kind of wondering if there's been that kind of communication and collaboration as part of the process of putting it all together.
When the project was launched in 2013, the provost charged the libraries and UITS with co-chairing this effort. And the provost had some ideas at that time about such things as a faculty advisory board and other kinds of formal links between the academic side of the house and this sort of production thing that we were going through. We have thought about that, and we plan to do it. But up to now, every bit of our effort, of everybody's, and there have been a lot of people involved in contributing time and expertise to this project, has been to just get the thing started. We're on the brink right now of it starting. It's within weeks. This is actually things are gonna start going through the process, and we're gonna actually create digital files. And it's gonna start small, and then it's going to really go. It's at that point we think we can best engage the researchers when we have actual things to show them.
Remember that this is a massive, large-scale effort, and so it has taken tremendous time and resources to get it up and running. And so you can think that layer upon layer of added value and services will be put upon this as the years go by.
I'd like to thank both of you for talking to us today. To learn more about the Media Digitization and Preservation Initiative, please visit mdpi.iu.edu. But before you do, please stay tuned for Just the Tip from Ross Wilkerson.
Thank you, Janae. Here at the CIB, we work with a lot of information every day. Most of what we handle is institutional data, but we know all of our students and staff have heaps of personal data as well. The university spends a lot of money and effort safeguarding its data, but you can protect yours with a lot less work. Just a few years ago, personal backup options were pretty limited. Luckily for our listeners, students at IU today have access to two magnificent cloud storage options: Google Drive, which is a part of UMail, and Box. If you used Google or Box before you joined IU, you'll note one earth-shattering difference. IU-sponsored accounts have unlimited storage, so it doesn't matter how much digital clutter you've accumulated, you can keep it all in the cloud. The fundamental rule of data backup is to keep multiple copies of your stuff. This ensures that loss or destruction of one copy is not problematic. Once you've uploaded to Google or to Box, those files are copied to data centers around the world, so it would pretty much take World War III to physically destroy your data. But physical destruction is not the only risk. You also need to be sure you can access your data. This is where our two services diverge. If you have a Google Umail account, you keep it and your stored data forever. With Box, you will lose the account when you graduate or otherwise leave the university. You could certainly transfer the data to a personal Box account or another service, but that will require a little bit more work for you. For me, Google is the most compelling option. And finally, the best data backup is one that's easy to manage. Both Google and Box give you the ability to download a small program that designates a sync folder on your machine. Any files you drop in that folder get automatically uploaded to the cloud, and vice versa. It will even sync changes to existing files. So if you edit a paper, come to campus, you can still get the most recent version of your paper in a web browser from any machine. Regardless of what backup method you choose, anything is better than nothing. A hard drive under the mattress might not be the most elegant backup solution, but I suspect it's more than many of you are doing now. Take care of yourselves out there. Janae?
Thanks, Ross. With that, I bring episode 18 of Talk Nerdy to Me to a close. If you'd like to learn more about MDPI, please be sure to visit mdpi.iu.edu. If you have other questions, feedback, or simply want to say hi, you can reach out to us online at talknerdy.iu.edu, on Twitter at talknerdyiu, and via email at nerdy@iu.edu. On behalf of Brendan, Ross, and Joe, this is Janae Cummings. Thank you for listening. We'll see you again in June. This has been an official production of the IT Communications Office. Copyright 2015, the Trustees of Indiana University.